Hello and welcome to this long overdue episode of the Cookbook Lab Chronicles. And I'm actually really excited about this episode because I'm so much deeper into the cookbook writing process than I was the last few times I came on to talk about this, which honestly is part of the reason I haven't done one of these in a bit. So since I was here last, the structure of my cookbook has become so much more clear to me. So I've kind of alluded to this already, but I love sous vide. My last cookbook was about sous vide cooking. My next cookbook is also going to be about sous vide cooking, but for this one, it's going to be even nichier, even more tight of a topic, and that topic is sous vide meal prep. And the more I work on developing this, the more excited I am about this cookbook topic. I really feel like it's going to be a game changer for home cooks and really eliminate that problem of what the heck are we going to have for dinner tonight. And that's as much as I guess I'm going to say for now. But at this point, things that have happened, I have developed or I have concepted about 75 recipes. Some of them will probably go. I'm sure I'll have other ideas that come, but that number feels right to me. So 75 feels good. One thing that I'm keeping in mind as I do this is I did some cost analysis, and in order for me to have the quality of book that I want to have, which is important, and this time I've told you guys before, I am going to be doing a hardcover for my book. If I want to be able to have the book be profitable, aka I make money on each book, and I don't want to charge obscene amounts of money for it, I need to stay at about 180 pages. So this 75 recipe mark feels good because then I can have some full spread recipes in there. I have plenty of room for my beginning content because I'm going to have quite a bit of instructional content. With most books, you have quite a bit of front matter and instructional content up front, but especially when you're doing a book that's a little more unusual for the average home cook. So in this case about sous vide, or say you were doing a book about a specific diet that maybe somebody hasn't embarked on before, like they find out they have to go dairy-free or egg-free or something like that. That front matter is super important because a lot of times people purchase specific cookbooks about that, like that, to be a resource for them. So I'm keeping all of that in mind as I think about my cookbook, think about which recipes I'm going to include and how many I'm going to include. So at this point, I have started the testing process, which that sounds a little weird and there's a reason for that, of about 20 recipes. So the reason I say that is for this particular book, I want most of the recipes to be completely freezable. So what I mean by have started the process is I've prepped them, frozen them, and now I'm just in the process of actually cooking them. So that feels good. I'm feeling pretty hyped about where I'm at. And so specifically today, I want to talk about recipe testing and some stuff that's even come up within the Cookbook Lab Slack channel. So in case you don't know, I run the Cookbook Lab, which is a course and community for people who want to self-publish their own cookbooks. So we have a Slack channel once you join, and there's lots of other people in there who are at the same stage that I'm at right now, where they're concepting and testing their recipes. And so we've been talking about how, and I've already kind of talked about this with the Cookbook Lab Chronicles, but I feel like some good questions have come up, so I just want to talk about it again. So how recipe testing differs from blog to book. The great thing about your blog is it's this living recipe, which means somebody can comment on it and say, I think you forgot this ingredient, or this didn't work for my oven, or I have a question about this, or whatever. And you can make live updates to your recipe. You can address their question really quickly. So if there are mistakes, or just even if you find out that your recipe was written in a way that isn't clear for everyone, you can go in and adjust it right then and there. It's not the case for your book. And not to mention, people are paying for your book. So you want to make sure that those recipes are as clear as possible and as well written as possible, and you want them to be able to be executed in anyone's kitchen. So those three things are super, super important when you're writing a recipe for a book versus when you're writing a recipe for your blog. And so the way you achieve this is obviously you test it yourself, and you one of my favorite marketing phrases, but it applies in this case too. You write those recipes like either a drunk adult or a toddler is reading them. So they need to be really clear, and there's specific things that we do in recipe writing, and it needs to follow those recipe writing guidelines. So that's super important. The second thing is going to be testing or having other people test your recipes. And one kind of I'm going to hop back for just a sec, because one kind of in-between step that I love to take is cooking that food for other people and getting their feedback. So that kind of feedback isn't quite good enough, because you're not getting feedback on the instructions or the method or anything like that, but you can still get their opinions on flavors. So for example, over the weekend, I tested 2 recipes for my family, my parents and brother, and aunt and uncle, and got their feedback live. Actually, it was 3 recipes. What would you do about this? Like, for example, one of them was a side dish that to me felt a little overcooked, but they all really liked it and said that they would keep it exactly the same. So it's really helpful for me to have that feedback. My taste, my preferences don't necessarily reflect the general public's. So stuff like that is super important. So anyways, and then the extended version of that is to have other people test your recipes. So I am at a point where I am ready to turn some recipes over to testers. So I'm kind of getting ahead of the game there. I'm not finishing testing all my recipes before I start giving some over to recipe testers, because I've already tested them myself and might as well have things going in conjunction with one another to make this process as speedy as possible. So many of you delightful people have signed up to become recipe testers. I put out a call in my Instagram stories. I sent out a call to my email list, and I put out a call in cooking Facebook groups that I'm in. So the New York Times cooking community and some sous vide Facebook groups that I'm in. And within 3 hours, I had enough testers, because everybody's amazing. And one thing that's always interesting about this process that I get questions about from prospective authors is, what do you tell people? Like, how do you get people to sign up? Like, don't they want something? And the answer is no. Like, most people, one, are looking for some kind of recipe inspiration for their weeks. Like, otherwise they'd just be Googling it anyways. 2, they're really excited to support you, especially as a blemishing cookbook, or not blemishing. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. We're gonna skip that word. Cookbook author. Is it flourishing? Is that what I mean? And 3, they're excited to be behind the scenes with you. This like brings people into the fold of your process and really helps them connect with you in your process. So in my experience, people are hyped to help you. I would be hyped to help somebody else if I was asked to be a recipe tester. So don't overthink this part. So within 3 hours, I had all the testers that I'll need for this process, which is phenomenal. So I have, if you join the Cookbook Lab, you get my template for all the questions that you should ask or have your perspective or your recipe testers answer. So it's questions like, how easy was this recipe to prepare? Were the instructions clear? How was the texture of the food? How was the flavor of the food? Things like that. So it's a balance between making this easy and getting as much information as possible. So for example, for the sign up process for my email list, I didn't have anybody fill out a form or anything. I just said, if you're interested, respond to this email and say I'm in, and that's great. And then I do need information. I do need decent recipe feedback. So that one, there's not as much wiggle room, but you can at least make it really easy to fill out. I just use a little form. And you can keep the questions as tight as possible and ask as few open-ended questions as possible. You want yes and no's, you want sliding scales, like 1 to 10 type stuff. And then at the end, you can have any other feedback and let them answer that. But if you have a bunch of open-ended questions, it just becomes more tedious and more work to fill out. So there's some things to consider throughout the recipe testing process, which has been so much fun. A few other things, I am starting to tiptoe into the design process, which I'm really excited about. And I've got a clear vision and a feel for this book. It's going to be a little bit different than my last book. I ordered some special backdrops just for the cookbook, which I'm really excited about. And then next week, I have a meeting, a 2-day boot camp with a PR strategist. And so I'm doing this because I know a ton about marketing and a good amount about PR, but I really want to go big with the PR for my second cookbook. And I want somebody who's an expert to help me with that. So, and hey, the more I learn, the more I can share. And I'm really excited to be working with her. Her name's Tiffany Urich. I think I heard about her on a podcast. You guys should definitely check her out if you're interested in doing any kind of PR. She's phenomenal, and I can say more once that's over. And if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to answer them. But yeah, that is what's going on in the world of Cookbook 2. Stay tuned. We're going to get back on a weekly schedule with these. And if you have any questions, just email me, DM me, drop them in the comments, hit me up wherever.